Shalom, family. Thank you. Well, as you can tell, we're having some challenges here at the old HQ, and it's been a challenge just getting everything to work. So we are battling at 5:59. Anybody think that's a little suspicious? All day long, got no issues. Suddenly at 5:59 is when we decide the computer wants to either update, uh, not want to process a file, not want to do certain things. Who finds that a little suspicious? I do. I think it's interesting that I spend all day working. Shalom, everyone. I have no difficulties. Then when it comes to doing the news right before, I mean, it's getting a little bit interesting, ladies and gentlemen. So please keep me in your prayers as we continue to declare the gospel of the kingdom and, of course, shine our light before men. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, thank you for your patience. For those of you who have been waiting a few minutes for us, we appreciate it. And I always know that if we're not exactly on time, there is a battle going on. So just pray for us. Stand in faith. Amen. And amen. Always a pleasure to hang out with all of you. Let's widen those comments so you guys can see one another. And always encourage when you share the link, when you like and subscribe. And we've had a few people that have joined us recently, and we're getting great comments. So thank you again for your encouragement and your love. For those of you joining us for the first time, we do have this wonderful, amazing website. You'll always find the latest broadcast will be linked right here at the top. And we do have, of course, remnantwatch.com. You can look at all the articles we've published in the past. And survival guides are important guides. You better have those. If you don't, make sure you grab them. I don't know when we'll pull them down, but so far we continue to see good reason to keep them up and help those of us who may not have thought about these kinds of things, emergency drills and things that you may not have given a lot of thought to that maybe you should. Because again, we are walking into some dangerous times, and having a backup plan, having a plan on how you're going to deal with difficulties, well, that's just wise. Amen. Because the scripture tells us a wise man sees trouble afar off and hides himself. Amen. So very important that we take that seriously, folks. I really hope you do. And on that note, let's get into the news. And tonight's top story is, of course, you know who is, of course, rattling you know what. So here we go with yet more war rumor. And this has been a major theme that we've covered considerably over the last several years. The state of anxiety that they love to keep the people in. And I know all of you are picking up on that. But this, again, is now creating it at another level. And many of you have been watching this slow-moving train wreck like I have since the late 1990s. And so here we go again with the boogeyman named Iran. And, of course, there are always threats in the world, but here it almost looks like we're picking a fight. So Trump is moving closer to a major war with Iran, and the Trump administration is closer to a major war in the Middle East than most Americans realize, and it could be very soon. And of course, this is behind a paywall. But one of the things that we want to understand about this conflict that is brewing is it's really not our fight. And it's in a region of the world that Israel is in, of course, and they certainly have an interest in this. But we, as the American people, really don't have a fight over there. And so this is becoming very problematic diplomatically for the United States. And speaking of diplomatically, of course, recently Tucker Carlson went down and had an interview with U.S. Ambassador Mike Huckabee, who, of course, believes very strongly in a Christian Zionist mindset and a Christian Zionist worldview. Maybe that's the reason why he was chosen for the assignment, I don't know. But he believes and says Israel has a biblical right to the land from the Euphrates to the Nile. And again, if we're talking about Yasharel, the actual people of the scripture, that'd be one thing. When we're talking about something created by a international body, it's something else. And it would be fine if they took it all, ambassador said, if Israel's claims on the Middle East, it would be fine. It would just be fine. So that goes to show you the mindset that is now prevalent in the administration. Well, I got to tell you, there's a whole lot of people that didn't agree with that thinking process. How many of you are shocked to see that there was some pushback on that? I'm not surprised that you're not surprised. Okay. I'm not surprised you're not surprised, because we are not surprisable people when it comes to most of this stuff. And so, of course, the Arabs and Muslim countries slammed the United States ambassador's remarks on Israel's right to Middle East land. And, of course, that's bringing up the conversation whether they have right to even the land they're on. Arab and Islamic countries issued a joint condemnation on Sunday of remarks by U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee, who suggested Israel had a biblical right to a vast swath in the Middle East. Huckabee, a former Baptist minister and fervent Israel supporter, was speaking on the podcast of far-right commentator and Israel critic Tucker Carlson. In an episode released Friday, Carlson pushed Huckabee in the meaning of biblical verse, sometimes interpreted as saying that Israel is entitled to the land between the Nile and Egypt and the Euphrates and Syria and Iraq. In response, Huckabee said it would be fine if they took it all. And of course, this was a comment made during a very, very heated time in the Middle East, right? So we got to say at the very least that what would you say it's an ill-advised comment? Would you call it that? Ill-advised, right? Perhaps. Or maybe they're just telling you to your face. And the statement released by the United Arab Emirates Foreign Ministry was signed by the UAE, Egypt, Jordan, Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Oman, Bahrain, Lebanon, Syria, and the State of Palestine, as well as the organizations of Islamic Cooperation, Arab League, and the Gulf Cooperation Council. That's a lot of countries that didn't agree with you, that lived there. So once again, these are the kinds of things that are starting to affect international policies and international decisions that could change lives, right? So now we're talking about war as a possibility, right? So, and of course, now the Houthis, which of course are become famous for some of their resistance, they are mobilizing troops in Yemen with unclear targets as possible strike in Iran looms. And in this report, and according to the report, the Houthis have mobilized in various fronts within Yemen in what may be an attempt to ignite a new round of war. And of course, these are a group that do not back down. They may be mobilizing force in an offensive, in a report that has come out in their media. And basically what they're saying is that they're essentially moving to a new level of battle readiness, folks. This is really what this point is about. And according to the report, the Houthis have mobilized on various fronts within Yemen. It may be an attempt to ignite a new round of war. And there has been quite a bit of conflict already in that area. And it looks like more is on the way. So now we're seeing that the IRGC is taking control of Hezbollah and preparing, look at this, for war with Iran and Israel. Iran has been pressuring Hezbollah to fight alongside it. It should hostilities erupt with Israel. And Iran-backed Hezbollah is now operating under the direct control of officers from Tehran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, according to the sources cited by Saudi outlet Al Arabiya, as Israel carries out strikes in Lebanon, which is just north of Israel, for those of you who don't know, and regional tensions continue to rise. The sources told Al Arabiya that IRGC officers, some of whom recently arrived in Lebanon from Iran, have assumed responsibility for restructuring Hezbollah's military capabilities. So this is one of the things that Iran is accused of, is maintaining what are known as proxies. And Hezbollah is one of the well-discussed proxies of Iran. And this lends credibility to those charges. So Hezbollah, of course, is encamped in Lebanon, just north of the Golan Heights, just north of Israel, and of course between them and Syria. So in a very strategic place, and definitely within the comments of Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. So certainly now exacerbating that place. And if you were just told, hey, we're going to come and take, all your land, you live in Oklahoma, and they say, we're going to take half the state of Oklahoma, and that's the part you're in, well, you'd probably get ready for a throwdown, right? So things are starting to heat up in that area. And of course, now some of the plans for these peace initiatives are starting to surface. So we're now seeing what was in the works. What did they think was going to be a good idea, right, guys? So what are we seeing? Well, some of the things we thought we'd see. So one of the things we knew was coming was there was going to be a restructuring of the Gaza whole situation, right? So Trump's officials are planning to build a 5,000 person military base in Gaza, file show, an exclusive approximately 350-acre compound planned as a base for a multinational force, according to records reviewed by The Guardian. But how much you want to bet that the only people that are going to be allowed into this multinational force are people that are part of this border peace? So this is a problem that the world is now going to have to deal with. Look at this mess that they now have in Gaza that they have to deal with. This is horrific. The amount of loss of life, the amount of damage, the amount of destruction, the amount of absolute horror that has been imposed on these people has been beyond words. And we've watched this, again, slow-moving train wreck this whole time. The Trump administration is planning to build a 5,000 person military base in Gaza, sprawling more than 350 acres, according to the Border Peace contracting records reviewed by The Guardian. The site is envisioned as a military operating base for a future international stabilization force, planned as a multinational military force composed of pledged troops. Here we go, folks. This is ominous, very ominous. And then on top of that, because, well, we just don't have enough to worry about, enough going on in our world, Trump's saying, hey, I'm going to make up my mind whether I'm going to go fantastically high and really do a fantastic job of bombing Iran fantastically. And so here we go. Trump is saying he will decide whether to bomb Iran in the next 10 to 15 days. He's making this, of course, a issue that, of course, gets resolved by the Board of Peace, right? So wouldn't it be nice if we come to the edge of war, right to the edge, and then the great Board of Peace wins the day with a peaceful document that prevents war and brings in peace. Stand by, look for that. Look out for that. Look out for a move that does exactly that. We can't be naive. And we've been subjected to so much theatrics that it's not even funny. And again, this is exactly where they want you. Right here. This headline tells you right where they want you, right here. World on edge. That's what they want. I've watched this consistently. You all have too. You're very intelligent people. You can't tell me that you don't see that they want anxiety to be a lead component in your decision making. Anxiety makes for some really bad choices, and the Trump identifies timeline for strike on Iran as world's largest aircraft carrier heads to the Middle East. And Donald Trump could make a decision on military strikes on Iran soon, with the U.S. military ready to potentially launch an attack by this weekend. And American military assets have been building in the Middle East in recent days ahead of the possible strike, CNN reported. And of course, they're reporting that he's spending a lot of time thinking about that. And so one of the things that we have to understand is that there's a tug of war going on. Again, like I said, he wants to be known as the president of peace, but he's got some forces in the region that would like him to light it up, if you know what I mean. So this is a dangerous time, folks. So we have to be very aware of the ripple effect that is going to occur. And it will occur. There will be a ripple effect. Folks, stand by for it. I said there, if this gets hot, if this fight goes hot, it will not just be an air fight. It will ripple. Every indication is that it's going to ripple. So let's hope it doesn't. Let's pray against it. Let's stand against it. Let's believe for peace and for cooler heads to prevail. But unfortunately, it's looking bad. Israel, of course, is on high alert in this time period as they're anticipating more and more challenges coming up as the officials assess imminent U.S. strike on Iran. Security cabinet meeting postponed. And so the security cabinet was supposed to meet yesterday to avoid an Iranian miscalculation. They are basically concerned about what is going to be the response from Iran. And it's reasonable to be concerned about that. You guys can check out that story on remnantwatch.com. And so what are your thoughts about this entire theatrical performance? Are you getting tired of hearing about the theatrics? Do you think that's what it is? Or do you think there's legitimate reasons for us to be in a potential conflict with Iran? How many think that that is legitimate and we should be chasing it? Love your thoughts on it as the U.S. moves more than 50 fighter jets to the Middle East as talks with Iran continue. Now, if we do declare war, then we're all on board, right? We back up the president. We stand united. We go all in. But we do have the right to question as we're approaching this to say, hey, is this the right course of action? The United States recently sent 2 warships to the Middle East ahead of the Switzerland talks. The United States has repositioned more than 50 fighter jets to the Middle East over the past 24 hours, a U.S. official confirmed to the Axios news site, as American and Iranian officials conducted a second round of talks in Switzerland on Tehran's nuclear program, which, of course, is the big thing. The movement of the aircraft was identified through open source flight tracking data and reported by outlets including the BBC, alongside social media accounts that monitor military aviation activity. And the data shows a surge of U.S. military flights headed toward the region over the past day. So those that are paying attention to flight logs and flight, traffic and so forth, well, they're watching the planes actually flying over there. It's kind of hard to argue with that. They got transponders. You can watch this stuff. And people actually do. I don't know why. Sitting around all day, that's what you're doing. But hey, thank you for confirming that, in fact, they are sending those planes. And of course, Iran is, of course, not sitting still. They're doing some things on their own. And this was incredibly aggressive and goes to show that Iranians are not afraid, and they essentially consider themselves a force to be reckoned with in the region. And Iran partially closes the Strait of Hormuz. And for those of you that don't know, this is an area, a waterway that goes from the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean. And it is like the Panama Canal. It is a canal area that is limited in its width. And so it is something that can be choked. And Iranian state media on Tuesday reported a partial and temporary closure of the Strait of Hormuz, widely considered one of the world's most important oil choke points. And it comes as the U.S. and Iran hold nuclear talks in the Swiss city of Geneva, and oil prices were last seen trading lower, erasing earlier gains as the talks concluded. And so, whether or not they can hold that, that's a different story. There's a tremendous amount of firepower in that part of the world. So I wouldn't necessarily, that's why I thought that was really ballsy to try to do. So again, is this theatrics? Is the United States of America and its naval forces allowing some of this to make it look like, it's like the fighter that knows he can win, but he wants to let the other guy, kind of, juice around a little bit. Come on, man. I'm gonna rough you up. And they're like, yeah, you're looking tough there, man. Oof. And they're just like getting their gear on, like getting their stuff. And like, oh yeah, you're looking real tough. And it almost looks like that. Almost looks like they're sort of letting Iran get away with some things, letting Iran do some things, hoping that they cross a really bad line. And so again, this is what it looks like to me. What are your thoughts? You guys are watching the same crazy as I'm watching. And I think that one of the biggest challenges that we have with this is not Iran. And this is the challenge we have. Now, guys, I want you to take note. We went after the United States, so the United States is standing against China and Taiwan. So let's start there. That's not making them happy, to say the least. China and the United States, relations between China and the United States probably haven't been this bad in recent memory. Then you add to that the fact that the United States basically took over Venezuela's oil production, which was hoped to be, I think, a supplier for both the Russians as well as Cuba was another country that was depending on that oil, we found out. So that now disrupted that. Plus, economically, it disrupts economics, right? So it's huge amounts of oil. It's a lot of money. So on top of everything else that you're seeing here, you're watching a squeeze going on, right? So, and then of course you saw that in Eastern Europe, we're just winding up this fight, or so we keep thinking. And then next thing you know, we hear about 50 drones that went over and blew something up in Russia, right? So they're preoccupied with that fight. That's a hot war. And yet they're continuing to posture as if to threaten that there is a line. And if the United States crosses that line, which I can't imagine how they haven't crossed it already, but okay, that they're going to come. And what gives me pause is the prophecies of Dmitry Duduman, which prophesied that the United States would be bothered or busy with an internal revolution. This was in the 1980s, and that it would get attacked. So this was the same sort of prophecies that Henry Groover had. And again, many of you know about these things that were talked about decades ago. And now time has gone by. A generation has come that doesn't remember these warnings and is not aware of the setup that we're walking into. So how many find it not so surprising to see this headline where Russia's Lavrov, which is, of course, their diplomat, he's a foreign minister, and he's warning against any new U.S. strike on Iran because Russia's got Iran's back. And Russia's got to decide when it's actually going to do something. It didn't do anything with Venezuela. And it's not done. It's threatening to do something with Cuba. But this is now pushing the fight, right? So Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, in an interview made public on Wednesday, said that any new U.S. strike on Iran would have serious consequences. To call for restraint, find a solution to enable Iran to pursue a peaceful nuclear program. Lavrov's interview with Saudi Arabia's Al Arabiya television was aired a day after U.S. and Iranian negotiators held indirect talks in Geneva to head off a new mounting crisis between Washington and Tehran. So I do think that there actually are efforts to avoid this conflict. Now, why does it matter to you and me? Because, folks, no conflict stays in the region that it's in. Every conflict has ripple effect. Every conflict has economic impact you didn't expect. And every conflict has pain that we don't need, death that is unnecessary. And so thank you for joining me in prayer for those families that would be in harm's way, those that are in the pathway of damage and destruction. Pray for them now before these things start to occur, and perhaps we can push the needle back and buy some time for people to cool off and have a different discussion that doesn't involve killing a bunch of people. That didn't have anything to do with this argument you're having in Geneva. They don't even know what you're arguing about, and their lives are at stake on both sides. And who knows where else. So again, somebody tell me the value of a bomb. And it looks like the Vatican has finally made its decision. Now, we knew Italy had made its choice, right? You guys knew about that. Italy had made the decision that they would not join the Board of Peace. And so that was, I think, a precursor to let us know that the Vatican wasn't down either. And sure enough, they made it official. Vatican says it will not participate in Trump's Board of Peace. And I think the Vatican doesn't have the money. So the Vatican will not participate in U.S. President Donald Trump's so-called Border Peace Initiative. Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Vatican's top diplomatic official, said on Tuesday, while adding that efforts to handle crisis situations should be managed by the United Nations, where we don't have to pay $1 billion to join. So the Pope is endorsing the UN because that's already there. And what Trump's doing is saying, I'm not funding the UN anymore. We're not writing any more checks for them, so they can go glub, unless you guys want to fund them. But hey, we're doing this. And watch this now, because one of the things that the Catholic Church is in Israel is a landlord. They have a lot of properties, especially in Jerusalem. How much you want to bet that Israel is pressing for changes in the status quo in Jerusalem? I guarantee it. I guarantee they're changing. It's one of the biggest irritations to the local Israelis is they're having to deal with the Catholics. So I promise you, this is a very clever play. Now think about it this way, guys. They say, hey, if you want to be involved in the conversation about what we're going to do with this land, you need to be a part of the Board of Peace. And then they don't really, make it a big deal. But hey, there is a $1 billion price tag that you got to pay to join. But hey, you're on board, and then your voice is heard, right? You're a nation state. You want your voice to be heard inside and the policy making and what have you. You got to pony up, knowing full well they couldn't do it. They didn't have the cash. The United States already dealt serious blows to the Catholic Church, and that's a conversation we can have a different time. So I don't think they had the funds, and if they tried to do it, it would have bankrupted them, right? So they had no choice but to say no. But here's the problem: now they just lost their voice at the table. And I bet you they're going to press that. I have a sneaking suspicion. How many of you think I might be right on that? And let me know. Those of you that know a little bit about insider politics in Israel, maybe you have a better insight. I don't know. It's just my gut feeling that this became that was another one of the sticking points. And of course, the Vatican does not feel like it should need to negotiate any of these things. And it is most certainly up against Israel in many of these ways. So I think this is also part of the conflict that needed to be resolved, and it's not being resolved. So I think you just saw a little bit of that conflict poking its head out through the Vatican's denial of the border peace. Which, why would the Vatican, okay, you got to think this through, why would the Vatican say, no, I don't want to be part of a border peace? You would think anything that has to do with peace, if I get invited, I'm going. All right, we're sending an ambassador. They could have pled and said, hey, we don't want to pay the fee, but we want to join. They could have done a lot of things. We have a vested interest. They could have done all kinds of things as far as that's concerned, but they didn't. And so understand that I think there's more dynamics at play. Again, the Catholic Church has a property interest in Jerusalem that I am certain has come up in conversation. I am certain it has. So they probably want to shift the status quo. They don't want that. They certainly don't want to pay for that. But now they may have just lost their voice and won't have a way to combat the fact that they weren't at the table. So now they're going to be in a lesser position and will probably cry victimhood as some of these changes occur. But I would be watching Israel over the next couple of years to see what changes occur with its relationship with the Vatican, which is going to affect its relationship with, holy sites and different things that are held in Israel. So it's going to get interesting as we go here. Meanwhile, there's Trump. He's not taking that defeat at the Supreme Court, who ruled that his tariffs were an overreach, which I think they overreached. I personally agree with the president that he has the right to tariff. I don't agree with what the Supreme Court came down with. I looked at their decision, and I think they made an error. So Trump is now challenging that by raising global tariffs by executive order to 15% shortly after implementing a reworked 10% levy. And the Supreme Court struck down most of Trump's tariffs in a 6-3 decision on Friday, but that did not stop him from making new tariffs. So they struck down old ones. He's made new ones. Why? Because now that's got to work its way through the courts. And in the meantime, he's probably going to release some pictures of people on islands, that may want to rethink their vote. President Donald Trump on Saturday said that he was hiking his new announced global tariffs to 15%, less than a day after announcing 10% worldwide duty. On Friday, Trump announced a blanket 10% import tax on all foreign trading partners after most of his sweeping tariffs were struck down by the Supreme Court. Well, he doesn't want to give back the money, so he's got to come up with a different tariff really quickly that they would still have to pay, and that therefore they could just use whatever they've already paid to credit toward that. So you see how that worked? That's pretty quick. The justices divided 6-3 ruled that Trump's aggressive approach to tariffs on imports from across the world was not permitted under a 1977 law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Here's the thing, folks. He's got other emergency powers. He doesn't only have that act. So they only ruled on one act. He has other powers, imperial powers, that he can utilize. So I don't think this is over. And anybody that thought that was the end of the matter is mistaken. Now, moving on to this hemisphere, we suddenly are seeing some major changes going on in Mexico. Please continue to pray for our friends in the southern in Mexico, because American couples were being trapped in Puerto Vallarta during a first trip away from their son. People are suddenly finding themselves in serious trouble. And of course, this is a big issue going on right now in Mexico, as they got after one of the cartel leaders, and he was killed. And then that erupted violence in the latest updates from Guadalajara, of course, are grim. And so anybody that has family in there and people down in Mexico, it is a very dangerous time. Keep them in prayer and be prepared to respond, especially if people need to exit what may become a war zone. And so they basically have declared code red after a high-profile law enforcement operation in the town of Tapalpa during the early hours of Sunday, in which Nemesio El Mencho, which was the leader of a group down there, he was the head of the Jalisco New Generation cartel,
one of Mexico's most formidable cartels. Okay, and so he was of course wanted. This is because the new effort that is going on in Mexico to bring these forces to heel, but it is not as easy as it looks, right? So these are forces that are fighting back, some of them with military style tactics and capabilities. So this could get very, very dangerous in our southern border. So again, keep this area in prayer, because while we're picking a fight overseas, we may get one in our backyard. Just saying. All right. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, something that we reported in 2014. That's right. 2014, we were given a word that we would hear. There were 10 things we were given to look for. Number 5 of those 10 things was that we would suddenly see a shift in public policy concerning UFOs. This is 2014, guys, that we received this word from Yahuwah. And that this was number 5, is that they would suddenly, and it would be governments, suddenly acknowledging UFOs, to go a complete about face. And so how many are surprised to see this headline? I'm not. Okay. And so, of course, this just happened. Trump is going to release all the government UFO and extraterrestrial life. And then we saw Obama come out and say something about, oh, yeah, aliens are real, extremely interesting and important. Then they just killed the guy, or he died, or something happened to the guy who discovered like water on an exoplanet, but then was going to report on something else and suddenly disappeared. I don't know. That's the rumor. What do you guys think? And President Trump announced Thursday they will order top administration officials to identify and release government files related to UFOs and aliens. Way to go, President Trump. Way to get those files open. Let's open everything, right? So let's get all the secrets out. Let's open the Smithsonian too while we're at it. Let's see what they're hiding. And based on a tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin process of identifying and releasing government files. Well, that'll distract you away from those pesky other files that everybody's reading, right? Related to aliens and extraterrestrial life. Here, read this instead, guys. Read this. Don't look over here. Look over here. Look over here. Come here. Come here. Come here, you and you. Come here. Look at this instead. Yeah, isn't this more interesting? Let's talk about this instead. Ooh, look at the flying saucers. Pay no attention to the man behind the mirror, man, behind the curtain, right? Pay no attention to these people. There's nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, while you're all being distracted by all this nonsense, you're being attacked. And I don't mean lightly attacked. You are straight up being full on assaulted by something that we have all let into our world without really giving it a lot of pushback, because it came in saying, how may I help you? How may I help you? And so we didn't think much of it, because after all, who gets mad at something that says, how may I help you? How may I help you? How may I help you? Right? You typically think, okay, you're just like a person at the store, person at a department store, maybe a salesperson at a mall. How may I help you? Except it's much more nefarious. And that's what we're beginning to realize as we walk through these gates that are, one-way gates. We start realizing they're check valves, and we're headed in a direction. And many of you are slowly starting to figure out that they may have tricked everyone. And so now look at this. How many people are suddenly going to read this that are over 50 years old going, oh man, I'm in big trouble? How many? 50, 60 years old going, you got to be kidding me, man. You got to be kidding me, man. Like, wow, that does not paint a good future for me, if that's true. Because how many people actually have what he says here, right? You need $2 million to retire, and almost no one is close. BlackRock CEO warns. A problem that Gen X will make harder and nastier, according to him. So BlackRock CEO Larry Fink warns Americans should be worried about retirement. Meanwhile, these guys have been robbing Americans for decades, but there's a different story. And, we haven't saved enough to retire comfortably, billionaire BlackRock CEO wrote in his 2025 annual shareholder letter. And, of course, he's scathingly rebuking the American people. And almost no one is close, considering 62% of the survey had less than $150,000 saved for retirement. That figure is only about 7% of what they think they need to retire comfortably. And Fink 73 has long warned Americans about retirement crisis, with one of his other main arguments being the security system that fails because of life expectancy that is rising. And that is, again, one of the competing factors, because in their thinking, oh, it's a problem for people to live too long. Well, how many know that I don't want my government thinking that, people are living too long? Because I don't want them to start devising plans to say, how can we shorten this lifespan? How can we solve this problem? I got no life, So I'm not really fond of hearing people talk like this. And of course, they always consider themselves exempt until they're the ones in the line. So hopefully they'll wake up and realize no one will be coming to defend them either. And now they're starting to really do some creepy things. We have some very extensive patents, but we would never do this. Okay, this is getting creepy. And by the way, we have an end of life product called Recall DX that was originally in design. It was actually a eulogy product that allows people to get something, especially from their loved ones, at the end of life, because many times you get a paragraph at best, and that seems woefully insufficient, especially for a life that spans 70 years and was, say, a writer, an author, a poet, and no one has that content. So that's something that really motivated us. And again, Recall DX is the product that came as a result of that, and it does a whole lot more than that. But that was something that we took very seriously and take as a form of real reverence and respect for the battles that we all face as human beings. And so when I saw this, I was really disturbed, because at first it seems like no big deal, but I want to explain it to you. So now death isn't the end, according to Meta's patent. So they just patented this, which I think is morbid, that this is what they decided to patent. They patented an AI that lets you keep posting from beyond the grave. Yeah. So you know what they decided? They decided, oh, you're dead. Oh, you can't stop posting. We need your content. We need you to keep on moving, because we need people to not know that you're gone. Is this not the creepiest thing you've ever seen? Can you imagine somebody that passed away, suddenly their account's still on? Meta wants your social media account to be immortal. It wants to take over after you're done with it. Well, after all, you nurse this identity. It just wants to take over. The company was granted a patent in late December that outlines how a large language model can simulate a person's social media activity, such as responding to content posted by real people. The language model may be used for simulating the user when the user is absent from the social network, for example, when the user takes a long break, or if the user is deceased. So it's not, they threw the, if he takes a long break, he might take a long break. And so we want to keep his account going, just as a service. Or if he dies. Oh, I'm sorry. Did somebody catch that? Or if he dies, right? Which means you're going to have millions of accounts that were legitimate people at one time, but now they're gone. Their family doesn't have control because person didn't give legacy control. That's what you got to do. You got to give legacy control, or some kind of legacy contact or something like that. You got to let them know who it is that would then have closing power on your account. So that doesn't happen. But that, to me, is very creepy. So it's like you're hijacking the influence that person had in their lifetime, right? So you're influence grabbing. And they awarded them a patent for it. So that's what they went and patented. They didn't patent ways to set you free. They didn't patent ways to improve the technology. They didn't patent ways to reduce frustration. They didn't patent ways to improve their actual delivery of truth. No, that's not what they patent. Well, they can't, because we already own those. But what they patented was, hey, when you're dead, we're going to keep running your account. That they went down to patent. Do you understand that they spent the time to patent? If you guys aren't animated about that, well, then I guess you don't really understand the war we're in. But we are in a digital war. We are in a digital war, folks. That's why we need your help. That's why we need your support. That's why we need you to stand together. Because if we don't stand together, we will certainly, if we don't hang together, we will hang separately. That's what they used to say, right? It's a very important thing to remember. And, and these guys are trying to kill you every way they can come up with. The human body was never designed or intended to handle ultra processed foods. This is the former FDA guy. It's not some crackpot or some guy, off on the internet corner or something. No, this is former FDA head David Kessler. And he's telling the people straight up in an increasing number of Americans across, and it's because the atmosphere has changed. And a lot of it is because of you guys, right? So you guys have been blowing the whistle on everything from fluoride to you name it, right? And guess what? It's changing the public discourse. So this proves, by the way, that even a small number of people, if they have the truth, can change a country. So today, an increasing number of Americans across the political spectrum make America healthy again. Activists to everyday shoppers are voicing concern about the health impact of ultra-processed foods. I think ultra-processed foods are on their way out. What do you guys think? I'd love your input, but I think that even the secular guys, even the secular people, I mean, non-believers, people that don't even talking about eating clean, they don't even care about that, but they're even starting to ask, wait a minute, how does McDonald's still have meat no matter what? They're starting to ask all kinds of questions that they never asked before. And I think it's about time. So kudos to the American people that are finally waking up. It took a while, but better late than never. And so at least they're awake and at least they're aware of what's going on. Now, I think that we have lost our minds collectively. I don't mean that lightly. I think that as a general society, we've lost the boundaries of normal or what I would call decorum. So this is what I mean. We've lost our minds a little bit. We used to know certain things, right, guys? I mean, there were things that were like common sense. You didn't have to tell anybody. You know what I'm saying? Not anymore, Jack. Now you got to tell everybody everything. Suspect attempts to storm the Delta Airlines flight cockpit. Everybody knows that's a no-no. And he attempted to storm the cockpit of a Delta Airlines flight that was grounded in Houston on Wednesday morning. And the Houston Police Department said it received a call about the incident at 5:38 in the morning, for crying out loud. Sit down and drink a mochaccino. What are you doing? Right? Trying to storm the front door. What are you doing? Right? We've lost it. And so as a society, I think we have serious issues. I think too much television, changing channels, changing programming. I remember back in the 90s, I remember mentioning this, that if I stopped at a hotel, and I did 40 cities one year in 1999, I did 40 cities, stopped at a lot of hotels, and I would look through the channels. It used to be 30 or 40 of them. I'd cycle through them once or twice and then turn the thing off. There was never anything to watch. I used to comment about that all the time. And that was when it was only 30 or 40 channels. What's it now? Plus YouTube. I think it's scrambling brains, folks. And so this is why it's important that we be informed without being overwhelmed. Now, many of you heard about the Supreme Court issue. And of course, Trump is calling it just outright disloyalty to the Constitution or the tariff ruling. Well, I think this is yet going to be another story. So I think we're still going to see some things come out with the old Supreme Court. I think they're going to be in a little trouble, especially since they have art that's compromising. Mr. Roberts is going to probably get some art in the public, is my guess, and probably get himself removed as Chief Justice. President Trump on Friday launched an extraordinary attack on the Supreme Court after it ruled against him on tariffs, describing justices in the majority as a disgrace to our nation. I think he makes a really great point, and I'm not just agreeing with him because I think, pro-Trump or anything like that. No, I think he actually made a really good point. The fact is that the law gives him, as the executive, the right to impose controls over international trade, and the fact that he chose the method of tariffs may not have been popular, may not have been something that many people even agreed with, but it was within his purview to do, which is why he turned right around and did it again. So he's going to bring this argument up against it. And my suspicion is the argument's going to change. They're probably going to argue a different law. So they have like a face-saving, oh, well, this was a different law kind of moment, but they're going to go ahead and fix this because this was a rebuke of him, and I think it's only going to go so far down that road. I want to switch gears here because something that we're seeing very disturbing. We usually comment on just one or two of these, but now this is getting really bad, guys. And if you still have your children in public schools after all the reports that we have done here on this channel, then I don't know how to help you with some of what we're starting to see right now. So again, more and more evidence that you really need to rethink. You need to prayerfully rethink the way you govern your life. if you are putting your children in perpetual risk with the predatory level that is now out there. High school student is arrested, or school teacher is arrested in an alleged case involving a student. This is now going on and on and on. She turned herself in and was later released on bond, but nevertheless, Georgia high school student was arrested for child molestation and improper sexual contact. Okay, and so again, and it's happening to a lot of women. Have you guys noticed that? A lot of women are a falling victim to this particular sin. And the scripture tells us that the spirit of fornication will come upon women. So it's a very dangerous time. You need to be very careful about this. And again, many people taking it lightly. I don't think you should. I think you should take it very seriously, because it is a life and death thing. And many people do not realize that it will cost them their life. And in fact, that's what happened to a worship pastor when it finally came home to roost. A worship pastor ended up killing himself after he was arrested on sexual abuse charges. And this is a former worship pastor at Pleasant Grove Baptist Church in Kentucky. He died by suicide after his arrest on multiple sexual abuse charges involving a minor. And so many of these, again, were people who themselves were abused, victimized as children themselves, became obsessed with that, then ended up victimizing someone else because that was never mitigated. That damage that was done to the child was never mitigated properly, and it matured into an abuser. So abuse victims, if not properly remedied, can turn around and become some of the most horrific abusers. In fact, that is a common story you hear. So that you will interview people that turned out to be horrific abusers, and you find out, oh, he was abused as a child. And so this then rippled. So we have to keep an eye on these things going on in our world. And again, a former teacher guilty of bestiality and possessing child porn sentenced to prison. So this is yet another case. This was out of Texas. A former Texas teacher has been sentenced to prison after pleading guilty to the charges he faced. Former Wells ISD teacher Hillary Daniel Williams, 32, pleaded guilty Tuesday to bestiality, possession of intent to promote child pornography, and indecency with a child and sexual contact. Judge Todd Kossaw handed down Wilson's sentence, which includes 20 years on the sexual contact charge and 20 years on the child pornography charge and 2 years on the bestiality charge. Officials did not immediately say whether the sentence would be served concurrently or consecutively. And Williams and her boyfriend, Michael Scott Carey, 38, were arrested last February after authorities said evidence on McCary's cell phone showed pornographic images involving a child and a dog. A child and a dog. Whew. Father, have mercy. And, again, this is going to cause wild swings. So you're going to see things like this occur as well, because there's going to be massive pushback going the other way. And we are definitely seeing the pendulum swing the other way. So, again, folks, this is a rocking ship. And Tennessee bill, of course, now is coming out that would allow the death penalty for women who have an abortion. So this is, again, swimming completely to the other side of the spectrum. This is the way societies move. Tennessee has some of the strictest anti-abortion laws in the country, and the Human Life Protection Act prohibits all abortions from fertilization without exception for rape or incest. Of course, they're going to come under fire nationally, but they don't really care. 2 Tennessee Republicans are seeking to impose the death penalty on women who have abortions, requiring the same penalties for women involved in the homicide of her own unborn child as defendants charged with homicide. So they are now no longer giving the unborn child a non-human status. They're giving the unborn child a human status, which frankly is not inconsistent with other states. This is the part of this that's really weird, because if you killed a mother who had a baby in her womb and the baby dies, you get charged for 2 deaths. You don't get charged for 1. So it makes sense then that if you would be charged for homicide if you deliberately killed a mother, and you would also be charged for homicide if you killed a baby in her womb, then how is it different to make this case? So they made a great argument here, and so this is going to be interesting to watch how it's enforced, whether or not it's true, whether or not that's the case. I don't know, but I do know where abortion came from, and it came from the Nephilim, from the fallen, from the Nephal, from the wicked demons that taught men how to abort babies in the womb. So we know where it started because the book of Enoch tells us the truth. So we don't want to support something that we know did not come from heaven. So that part we are all in agreement on. But nevertheless, this is an interesting swing in society, which will affect day-to-day operations. So stand by. It's coming down. Now, one thing that I saw that I think also is a result of some pushback is stores that thought they were going to go all, all beastie. They thought they'd be cool going all beastie. You know what I mean? You guys know what I mean by that. Whole Foods is ditching its dystopian palm by palm biometric payment option. Yeah, because it was probably a wholesale failure, especially in America. Whole Foods market is shutting down its palm scan payment system nationwide, removing the devices from more than 500 stores by June 3rd after shoppers largely ignored them. So again, those who were thinking that was going to be the, quote, mark of the beast and all that stuff, they got a big giant head fake. So again, we saw some interesting things there. This has been going on for, again, decades, people. It's really about the way in which that they trick you. And again, this comes down to programming. It comes down to the technology that they hand everybody. If they're handing it out for free, you're the product, right? You're the product. And you don't want to believe me? Don't believe me. Believe Peter Thiel and other tech billionaires that are publicly shielding their children from the products that made them rich. That's right. If they won't let their child use it, that should be mega sus. Just saying. Okay? Mega sus. So as far back as 2010, Apple co-founder Steve Jobs told a New York Times reporter that his kids have never used an iPad, and we limit how much technology our kids use at home. Since then, the trend of Silicon Valley billionaires keeping his families away from the technology has become more pronounced. I know Bill Gates never let his children use these things. You want to know why? Because they're programming devices. They are slave makers. Okay. And I've been trying to tell you guys that. And because you don't understand how it works, you're going to push it away. But it's walking you into a slave mentality, the way a slave thinks. And it is so subtle and clever. By the time you figure it out, the walk back is going to be considerable. And they know that. They also know that people that are lazy-hearted and lazy-mind, they don't have the intestinal fortitude to leave even if the gate is open, because they know that the walk will be lonely and difficult. So they would rather go to hell with their friends than walk to freedom by themselves. I'll say that one more time. They'd rather go to hell with their friends than walk to freedom one at a time. And they understand that's reality. So in the United States, we got the head fake. We got the Matador move, right? We're going to release the files and nothing's going to happen. We're going to release the files and nothing happens, right? How many of you are going, oh my goodness, this is crazy. What do we see? We're just totally being head faked, right? Not in Europe. In Europe, they're not playing that game. I don't know. They must have got a different memo because Europe's files, Europe's taking all those things seriously. And they're starting all kinds of probes. Paris prosecutor's office said it was opening 2 new lines of inquiry into alleged human trafficking and into other possible financial wrongdoings related to these files that were dropped. So I think that's good news because I don't think it was appropriate to ignore, especially when you got victims reporting victimization and nobody's investigating, right? So the U.S. Department of Justice released 3.5 million files surrounding the Jeffrey Epstein affair and has already led to high-profile arrests, resignations, and investigations across Europe and beyond. And on Wednesday, the Paris public prosecutor, Laure Bacot, opened 2 new lines of inquiry, one into alleged human trafficking, which is really good to know. I'm happy to see they're shutting it down. And remember, 2013, folks, nobody was talking about this. When United for Awakening, which was an effort that we were involved in, United for Awakening was praying for awakening so that everybody would wake up to the human trafficking problem. Well, mission accomplished. I'm not saying the mountains move, but I like the direction the rocks are rolling. I'd say most people are now aware. I'm saying this subject went from I don't know nothing about it to ooh. talked about in all kinds of places, right? And so, unfortunately, that's not slowing down those who are afraid and need control. Why they need control? Because they're scared of you, folks. You are the people they're most afraid of. You are public enemy number one. Don't forget that. Okay, that's wise to know. And the DHS wants a single search engine to flag faces and fingerprints across agencies, which again makes sense. But again, it depends on who's holding this power. So when the righteous rule, the people live in shalom. But when the unrighteous or the wicked rule, the people mourn. So it depends on who has hands on this stuff. That's going to determine a lot, right? So again, this is very, very dangerous stuff that's coming out. This one of those paywalls. So we're just going to go on and move on. We don't mess with paywalls, guys. We could do that, but we long ago concluded that that's just not worth it. And especially considering we are broadcasting, and so we didn't get rights to that. So that's why we don't pierce paywalls, even if we could, just because we don't want to have any issues with that. And again, there's more and more stuff coming about at schools. I'm running out of time here, but Indiana school secretary charged after husband finds her with student. Finds her with a student. Probe reveals affair with another. And of course, Alicia Hughes faces 5 child seduction charges after police discovered separate sexual relationships with 17-year-old during investigation. So this woman was in need of apparently some attention. And she was a married Indiana high school secretary, was beaten by her husband when he allegedly caught her in a tryst with one student, which led to an investigation which was discovered that she had sexual relations with another. So, wow, had to be quite a day. And again, for those that are taking that lightly, well, the evidence is just going to keep coming out. I think they're going to keep doing it. So I don't think they're suddenly going to, get some morality. I think this is just continuing to be a challenge. And here's something that I thought was interesting before we close up for tonight, something that you have to know. And that is that if you reject the Torah of Yahuwah, if you reject the Torah of the Most High or the commandments of the Most High, so remember the king said, if you love me, keep my commandments, right? If you reject the Torah of Yahuwah, the commandments of the Most High, you get different commandments and you come under different control. And that's what's slowly starting to happen right now. And people are reacting to it, but it's not going to be something you can stop very easily. And it's because of the curse. Now, that didn't take long. Islamic call to prayer loudly broadcast on New York City streets. Okay? So that's just weeks ago. New York City residents, including large populations of immigrants, elected a Muslim, Zohran Mamdani, the city's new mayor, and he immediately praised his new religion as one true faith. And now they are being broadcast into city streets at multiple locations. The Islamic call to prayer up to 5 times a day. Okay, so you don't want the Torah of Yahuwah, you're going to get something else, and it won't be asked; it'll be imposed upon you. So again, this is a reality that we are looking at. And coming back to the school issue, which I think was really an interesting final note. The schools are no longer going to be doing picture day, or at least they're rethinking it. And why? Well, because what they find out when they dug into those files was the connection. Viral post about photo giant LifeTouch zeroed in on guess whose ties to Leon Black, a former CEO of investment fund that bought LifeTouch parent company. And so, the LifeTouch studios, you guys all recognize that. That's where you get your pictures. Come on, you got to get your pics. Well, school districts across the country are reconsidering their Picture Day partnership after a social media post pointed to a link between a major school photo company and a billionaire investor found in the Justice Department's files on convicted sex offenders. So that's now a thing. We're all awake. And you're starting to see just how extensive that network was. And what were they doing? They were taking pictures of the children. Who wants to guess why they would want that? Who wants to guess why they would want to be the go-to company to take pictures of all the high school students in the country? All of them. Every one of them. Catalog them. Catalog the children like inventory. And they'll take your picture whether your parents paid for it or not. Remember that. They just take your picture. So we're now waking up. to the reality of the world that we live in, the reality of what we submitted ourselves to is probably a good way to put it, right? What did we submit ourselves to? Did we fall for a giant trick, folks? Have we just woken up? Are we just now waking up? Is that what's going on? Are we waking up to the reality of the world that we live in? Are we now realizing, oh man, we done messed up? We gave away power to people who are wicked. Well, I do think that that's in fact what's occurring. I believe we're people that are realizing that those that we thought were our friends were not. They are in fact our enemies. Well, that's it for today, folks. I pray this broadcast has been a berakah to you. I hope our information is encouraging to you. We thank all of you who stand with the house. I am appreciative, of course, of all the members of Remnant House who make these broadcasts possible. We are thankful, as this is a listener-supported work that we do. Well, thank you so much for joining us. May the Most High Baruch each and every one of you. Good night.